everyone, and welcome to a very special video because today the expansion announcement for the next Guild Wars 2 expansion was released, and in this video I want to go over some trailer analysis, some discussion, some story like predictions, as well as going through like the expansion website and all the other different pieces of information that we know about the expansion, and kind of just talk about everything, analyze everything, discuss everything, speculate about everything. So this is kind of like a 5-in-1 video. But starting off, I want to go ahead and play the brand new trailer for the upcoming expansion, and then we can go through it frame by frame and dissect it. So let's go ahead and watch the trailer now.
It may be dangerous, but this place, it's stunning.
Think there are any white mantle left in the area? I've heard enough rumors.
Janthir. A storm looms over that place. That is not a territory I wish to cross.
My bear kin have lived in Janthir longer than your cities have stood tall.
Is this?
Surely the strangers do not walk among all lands.
A false god!
This place is no longer home to me. But perhaps it can be for you.
And now that we have watched that, let's go ahead and go through it again, and let's go ahead and just take a look at basically every single frame of this trailer and talk about a lot of stuff. So I'm going to skip around a lot and kind of watch some things over and over and over again, where of course we have the start of the trailer with just our normal, trailer starting stuff, but it quickly goes into this shot right here, which is a really cool shot. It's also very loud, which the music is actually really, I say actually like it's a surprise. The music in every Guild Wars 2 expansion trailer and every like Living World trailer is phenomenal, so I highly recommend that you go through and listen to like the music intently. But we start off with this scene right here, which I'm just going to play like a couple more seconds here. This is just an absolutely beautiful shot, and I just want to say, like, right off the bat, I think this sets like a really good foundation for like the themes and the vibes of this expansion that we are going to like experience throughout the expansion. And it's a really cool vibe, and it actually reminds me of World of Warcraft a little bit, which is a game that I play on this channel, and I actually talked a lot about like some parallels between WoW with Sodal, but this reminds me a lot of Howling Fjord, which is all I'm going to say about the World of Warcraft in this video. And it's just a really cool vibe if you know anything about Howling Fjord, and this map kind of feels like that to me a little bit as we explore it. But as we transition out of this scene, we come into this one where we saw like the rocky kind of shore of this new area, but now we can see it kind of like the beaches as it goes into like a little bit of a foresty area, and we can see that there are like a lot of skeletons and like a lot of like kind of dead trees. So it seems like a very kind of like savage area is the vibe that they're putting into like this shot right here.
It may be dangerous, but this place, it's stunning.
So we hear there, it may be dangerous, but this place is stunning, which I think is kind of like a big vibe of this expansion, as I've said, where this is going to be like an incredibly dangerous area that is kind of like savage and untamed, but absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, where I love waterfalls, and we're going to see a ton of waterfalls here, and there are just a ton of like mountains and like different hills and some grassy areas and a bunch of rocky areas and like a lot of rivers. So I think this is going to be an incredible expansion when it comes to somebody like me who loves running around the world and kind of taking in some natural beauty. But we have this character right here who we are going to see a few times throughout this trailer, and I believe this is the representation for the player. So whenever we see this character, this is us running around the world, the expansion, doing things, fighting things, whatnot. Continuing forward,
It's stunning.
Think there are
we have this shot right here, instantly white mantle. So we see with this expansion, which, to say the expansion name, which I haven't said yet, is Janthir Wilds, which means we are going to the Isle of Janthir, which means that there's going to be some white mantle stuff going on, which is a really interesting story topic to think about because we have interacted a lot with the white mantle throughout Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, where for the most part we have kind of defeated all of the white mantle, but we know, based off our experiences in Living World Season 3, that there are still white mantle out there. So this seems to be an expansion that's going to focus on them a little bit and potentially to just clean up or wrap up their story, or maybe not. Maybe we'll see them more and more and more in the future and they'll just always be a presence. But it seems like this is a good opportunity to basically come to the Isle of Janthir, where maybe it's like the last white mantle from like all across Tyria and all across Kryda and the Maguma Desert, who basically kind of like fled because most of their forces were annihilated and their entire leadership was completely destabilized, and they are returning to the Isle of Janthir and are trying to like regroup and recoup, and we have them all here so we can kind of just go in and slaughter the rest of them. But of course, a theme of exploration in this expansion is what we can see right here, where we have a bunch of these like stone statues and stone walls and whatnot, and we can go ahead and like explore these white mantle ruins and potentially some Mersat ruins as well, because of course we know that the Mersat came from kind of this area of the world where the Isle of Janthir is an important part of Mersat society, and we know about like these mysterious golden spires and cities and towers and like the sprawling metropolis that's been hinted where the Mersat came from in like the Woodland Cascades to like the Isle of Janthir, that area of the world. And one additional thing that we can see here is actually this character right here, who we have our player character right here, and I believe this character, and based off who is talking throughout like this trailer, I believe this is Malice Sword Shadow, who is the Imperator of the Ash Legion, who is a pretty important character in Guild Wars 2, who we interacted a lot with in the Icebreed Saga, and it seems like we are getting a little bit of more story related to her, and we are going to be interacting with the Char a little bit in this expansion, which is going to be a really, really interesting thing to see and talk about because of a story beat in just a moment.
any white mantle left in the area? I've heard enough rumors.
Here we have a really, really cool shot where we can see it is like a wizard's like outpost or stronghold or whatever here in the Isles of Janthir, and it's actually like kind of floating up in the air, and we got these like cool chains here with absolutely gorgeous waterfalls and like mountains behind it. But this looks like, you know, Omnitus. It looks like, you know, one of the bastions or whatever, which we are going to see with this expansion. We have the integration of the Wizard's Court into Tyria a little bit, and the Astral Ward as well, where we can go ahead and read a little bit more about this in just a moment. But we are going to see that the Wizard's Court and Astral Ward are kind of revealing themselves to the world, and they are kind of allying themselves with like the people down on Tyria to try to create like a strong alliance between everyone to try to have like a very, very strong, like powerful Tyria or whatever to fight whatever the threats are in the world. And we're going to see that there is some sort of outpost with the Astral Ward here in this expansion, which is something that I actually really appreciate, because Soto is really cool, but I don't want it to be like a very individual expansion. I would love if like the story kind of calls back to Soto, where when we look at like Soto like isolated by itself, it's like a pretty decent story except for maybe the last couple of releases. And if you were to look at it as a completely isolated story, it was a good experience. But if you look at it from like the idea of a broader Guild Wars 2, a broader Tyria, it would feel really bad if Soto and like the story beats in Soto were like completely dropped and like completely forgotten about, where it would kind of feel like our year in Omnitus or whatever was kind of ruined in a way where like, yeah, we dealt with the threat of the Cryptus, but like we didn't make a lot of like story progress in general. Which, you know, there's like different pros and cons of like each of those things, but it's just nice to see a little bit of like the Wizard's Court and the Astral Ward here in this expansion, as it kind of transitions back towards Tyria, where they're not going to be a major like part of this expansion necessarily, potentially maybe, but they're still going to be a presence nonetheless.
Janthir. A storm.
So here, and talking as well, we have Anise, who is going to be one of the other major characters of this expansion, potentially alongside Malice Sword Shadow. So we kind of have this like human and Char like delegation thing going on as we explore this expansion, which when you look at Soto, we got 2 hints towards this next expansion in the Soto story if you like went out of your way and kind of like explored some stuff. Where one hint is when you are fighting Epark at the end of the storyline, we see the Eye of Janthir again, which the last time that we saw the Eye of Janthir, I believe, is in the Living World Season 3, Episode 6, where we are fighting Lazarus, the last Mersat, and we deal with him. And I guess I should say last in quotes because of some story we saw with Soto, where there might be more Mersat out there in the mist somewhere. But also alongside that, we saw the Eye of Janthir and the Bastion of the Penitent, where it's kind of like a major character of that entire raid. As we explore through the raid, he's kind of like watching at each like boss fight, and then he plays an important part in Saw Delacio's story in that raid. And then of course we have the Eye of Janthir in Guild Wars 1, which was a major story beat in that entire game. But then we also see that Olivia got a letter from Countess Anise about something going on in like Janthir, and like Queen Jenna wants us to deal with it. So we're probably going to see Livia again in this expansion like we saw in Soto, where she played a very minor part in Soto, and we were probably going to be interacting with Olivia and then Anise, of course, and then potentially the Shining Blade. So this is probably going to be another kind of like human-centric or focused expansion, kind of like Cantha or Alona in a way, where there's going to be a lot of human storylines, especially given that the Eye of Janthir is very close to Divinity's Reach, which is like the last major stronghold of humanity, or I guess not really anymore given like the whole storyline of Guild Wars 2. But anyways, we are going to see a lot of human presence in the Eye of Janthir, alongside the Char and alongside some new allies as well.
Looms over that place.
Here we have a really cool shot where it's kind of like integrating like the wilds of Janthir with like these ancient white mantle ruins, and these are 2 really cool statues, and I'm so excited to go through this area. Probably a good Griffin area, seems high up and like a nice course. Maybe there'll be a Griffin adventure here.
That is not a territory I wish to cross.
Here we have another shot, which is kind of interesting because it kind of looks like some hot springs or whatever. So we're going to see like a cool area like this somewhere in the expansion. But right here, we have a really interesting mob, which when I look at it, it looks like a chalk, which is kind of interesting to think about like chalk here in like the Isles of Janthir, which could be a very real thing. But I have a feeling that my eyes are like deceiving me a little bit, and we can see it like move a little bit right there. And I think ultimately we can't really tell exactly what this enemy is until we like get the expansion released and we kind of like explore this a little bit. But I believe it is going to be a member of a faction of enemies that is going to be a really big part of this expansion, which is about to be revealed to us in just a moment. And also, if we were to take a moment to look at the trees, these trees are like really cool because we can see that there's like some sort of marking on them. And I feel like this could just be like, maybe these are like special types of trees that just look like this, but it could also be like trees that are on fire, which would kind of be interesting, or it could be trees that are like magically infused, which could also be really interesting. And there's probably like nothing like super important about them. They're probably just like a decorative piece of the map, and it could be any of those 3 things. We just have to get a little bit of a closer look. Gorgeous shot. Oh, I love this shot so much. If you watch my channel, I love bridges and I love waterfalls, and here we see 2 bridges with like 3 waterfalls like right after each other in a beautiful canyon. This is probably going to be my favorite area of the entire expansion. I'm just gushing about like all of these like environmental shots of this trailer because this just seems like one of my favorite areas and like all of like gaming in any fantasy world. It just seems like a beautiful area, and I'm so excited to explore this. But like this shot is just gorgeous. I love these bridges and waterfalls, and I'm just so excited for this.
My bear kin have lived in...
So this super cool, where we have a new character who is talking to us, who's probably going to be a major character in this expansion, and this is revealing something pretty big. Where if you were to look at the environment really quickly, gorgeous waterfall, it looks like we have a new style of buildings here with like a new village of these bear people, which if you were to look at them, they look exactly like Coden, but instead of being polar bears, they look like grizzly bears. And what we probably have going on right here is that they are, for all extents and purposes, Coden, but they are related to Coden in a very similar way to what we see with Heart of Thorns, where when we were exploring Vanilla Guild Wars 2 and then future like expansions and whatnot, like including in Heart of Thorns, we have those normal Hylic, which are cool frog people that like run around or hop around and do a variety of different things. But with Heart of Thorns, we saw the introduction of the Itzel and the New Hawk, which are both Hylic, but they're like a different type of Hylic, like a different variety or whatever, that are from like their own area of the world, and like they evolved in like their own way. And I think that's going to be something that we kind of see going on right here, where we have the Coden of the Shiver Peaks from the far Shiver Peaks that have like moved south because of Jormak's influence, and they are like now in like the normal southern Shiver Peaks as well as spread throughout Tyria. But what we have right here is probably a group of Coden that are from the Shiver Peaks, but instead of going south, they probably went west and they settled on the Isles of Janthir, and they look more like grizzly bears now instead of polar bears. So they're basically like Coden, but are probably like just a different type of Coden. But he is talking.
My bear kin have lived in Janthir longer than your cities have stood tall.
Where he talks about how his bear people or bear kin have lived in Janthir for a very long time. So this is probably going to be like one of those like kind of like ancient race type of things, where we are coming to this area of the world and we are probably like messing up a lot of things, and these like poor people are just trying to live here and just vibe here. And then we are going to meet a lot of these people, and we're probably going to learn a lot about their culture throughout this expansion and a lot of like their customs and whatnot, which is going to be really cool. But from this shot, we go into the next shot, which is another really cool shot where we get a little bit of a closer look, where they definitely look pretty different than the Coden, where they look a lot like just Norn in bear form, kind of just like vibing there with like a different like rig or whatever, because we have like the Norn / Coden rig, and then you have the animal form rig, which is like a different thing. But here we can see they're standing like Norn and Coden, and they look very different than the Coden, but also very similar. So we're probably going to learn a lot about, oh my god, I just noticed this rainbow, that's so cool, so pretty. But we're probably going to learn a lot about these people throughout this expansion, of course, and we're going to be interacting with them a lot, which we might see some story going to the Norn with like the Coden, because we have some connections between the Norn and the Coden with how the Norn might have evolved from the Coden into the race that they are today. So maybe we are interacting with that a little bit, where we see a lot of human influence and quite a bit of Char influence in the form of Malice and potentially more stuff. And now we're kind of seeing a lot of Norn influence in this expansion, which is really cool, where if we were to look at the player character right here, who looks pretty cool, she is a Norn, of course. So we see that the representation for like the player character in this expansion is a Norn, which is something we saw in the Icebreed Saga, which was very Norn and Char focused. So I have a feeling we're going to focus a lot on like Norn story in this expansion, which might be cool. And maybe we'll interact with like the bear spirit of the wild, which might be an interesting story beat, given that we're interacting with like bear people. Which I will say, one additional thing is that we saw with the Soto expansion, we have a very interesting character called Waiting Sorrow, who is a female Coden wizard who, if you don't know who Waiting Sorrow is, basically a quick synopsis or summary, is that she was a wizard who was the former leader of the Bastion of the Celestial. And she created the Heart of the Obscure, which is like the artifact that we use throughout the expansion to like close rifts and whatnot. And she basically left the Wizard's Court, ultimately not necessarily for a reason we know specifically, but it kind of seems like she started not liking the Wizard's Court and the different wizards, and she really wanted to learn more about like herself and where she came from and her people. So we might see Waiting Sorrow in this expansion, where we will be interacting with her, and maybe she is a Coden from like these Coden and not necessarily the Shiver Peaks, though we do know Mabon did see her in Frostgorge Sound, which was in like a book or whatever, which is maybe something we'll see. But we could see that she's like traveling all around the world trying to interact with the different Coden and trying to learn about them, which might be a very interesting story beat that then goes back and integrates Soto into this expansion a little bit and transitions it. And maybe the like Wizards Court Astral Ward like outpost we saw earlier is trying to track down Waiting Sorrow, which might be very interesting. But that might also be related to a different story beat. I'm going on a big tangent here, which is something that I've talked about on my channel in a story video that I made like a year ago now, I guess, where I talked about a big theory that we see with the Secrets of the Obscure expansion, which for anyone who doesn't know, I'll link it down below and also at the end of this video, is that there are like the 6 different magics or whatever of the Astral Ward that we interact with, like the Celestial and like Strength or whatever, but we see that there is potentially a 7th one, the Penitent, and we see the Bastion of the Penitent located pretty close to this area of the world, which used to be a Wizard's Court Astral Ward stronghold, which then was retrofitted into a prison by the Barsat who found the ruins. And we see that there might be some sort of like penitent magic out there in the world that's kind of like the evil magic, and this might be something that we are interacting with a lot in this expansion, is this idea of the 7th magic. And there's potentially like more than 6 or 7, but we might be interacting with the Penitent, and we might have some story related to the Bastion of the Penitent, and it would just make a lot of sense given that we are in the Isles of Janthir, and we have like the Barsat and White Mantle stuff going on, and then we have the Eye of Janthir, which might be like an example of penitent magic we might see in this expansion, where maybe we see like Waiting Sorrow is kind of evil and is now channeling the penitent magic, and that's like a big threat. Maybe she's like the final boss of the expansion, if I were to go that far. But I think overall this is just going to be something that we interact with a lot in this expansion, potentially, I guess, this whole idea of the penitent magic, which I'm super excited for because I've been wanting to learn more about this since Soto dropped, and I've been wanting to learn more about kind of like the areas around the Bastion of the Penitent ever since that raid dropped.
Longer than your cities have.
Another really cool shot here where we see more of those like hot springs and geysers things, and we have this very beautiful house with this cool fence, and we can see that there's like just some, you know, steam or mist or whatever, and we have a really cool kind of like outpost here where it looks like a camp, and this kind of reminds me of like a hanging gallows or whatever it's called, where like you would hang someone to death, but I don't think it's that at all. I think this is just an entrance to an area, and a very cool landscape, some cool grass here, some flowers, and some cool bushes and whatnot. So just super excited to come through this area.
Stood tall.
Here we see probably one of the biggest selling points of the expansion, these cool trees in the background. Which these are actually pretty cool selling points, but I'm talking about what our player character here is wielding, and it is a spear, which we're about to see a lot of spear action shots, and they are all really, really cool. And what it seems like from this trailer is that every single profession in this expansion is going to gain access to land spears, which land spears were something hinted to in like a teaser trailer for this trailer like a few days ago. And this is just going to be like a new gameplay element in the game, where basically every single class is going to have 5 brand new weapon skills that they can use, and also a bunch of new like transmutation options with like spear skins and whatnot, which is a really interesting thing to think about because the underwater weapon skins were quickly dropped from being updated with like different weapon sets throughout the game's history, where of course there are a total of 19 weapons in the game, and with each weapon set in like vanilla GW2 we saw 19 different skins related to that weapon set introduced with each one. But quickly in GW2's lifespan they dropped the 3 underwater weapons to then only have to make 16 different weapon skins for each set, with like each Black Lion trading post release and with each like content release where they added new weapon skins that you can unlock to use on your character. And it's going to be interesting to see if they maybe go back and add some for spears, but we're definitely going to get a bunch of new stuff for spears in this expansion. Where alongside that we might see a big part of like the content progression in this expansion related to unlocking a brand new legendary spear, because there's only one currently in the game with the original generation 1 legendary weapons, but we saw with Gen 2 and Gen 3 we didn't get any, so maybe we will get a brand new one which you can unlock by doing everything in the Janthir Wild story and just doing a lot of different, probably a lot of like grinding and just unlocking a really cool weapon skin and also just a legendary spear, which would be nice to have. But here we can see what's potentially like a warrior just running forward and might just like hit some different things, where we can see some animation here, which actually maybe this is a guardian animation because this is giving off some like fiery blue like retribution type of things going on, where she's just fighting some wolves, and we can see this kind of like a general AoE attack where you would like throw a spear up in the air and it would come down and do some AoE and potentially some fire damage, which is pretty fun. And then another strike there So like a second ability where it's kind of just like a generic, maybe like the third or auto attack combo where you just have like a big strike against the wolves with some like blue fiery magic. And then here we have just a really cool like kind of holding your spear animation. But then we see these enemies, which are really cool enemies, because most likely we don't have this confirmed yet. I don't think we'll read through the expansion page in a minute, I might say there, but these are titans, which are demons for more or less, and they are probably going to be retconned to be like exactly demons from like another realm in the world. And we fought them a lot in Guild Wars 1 because they were one of the main like plot points for Guild Wars Prophecies, because Vizier Kilbron was trying to summon the Titans to the world to like destabilize the world for Abaddon to like then come forth and like do a bunch of things. Where in Guild Wars 1 Prophecies we go across the world and we hunt them down, but of course with Guild Wars 1 Prophecies we don't hunt them all down, and they are kind of just a story beat that is dropped. And we are going to see them here in the Isles of Janthir, or wherever this expansion is specifically set, in the Janthir Wilds, probably in the Isles. And we are going to be dealing with them throughout this expansion. So this might be kind of something that goes back to the whole penitent idea, where if we are to go down an idea where Waiting Sorrow is like a big villain in this expansion and she's channeling penitent magic, maybe she is like channeling or like using these creatures to her own whim, or whoever the main villain of this expansion is. But this is just a really cool thing to see, because Titans are an enemy that we have not yet fought in Guild Wars 2, and they are like a pretty cool enemy from Guild Wars 1 that played like a kind of minor part at the end of the main campaign, where we just deal with a bunch of them and then we go hunt them down after the campaign is over. And they are a really cool type of enemy for Char, which if we go back to kind of what we were talking about, the integration of the races into this expansion, it seems like we're focusing a lot on humans, Char, and Norn in this expansion, where the Titans were like the Char's gods or whatever. And we can see that like the Char kind of like had like a big moment where they cast the Titans aside and they didn't want them in their lives. And we see with like the Guild Wars 2 like Char opening trailer where they talk about, we killed our gods, they killed the Titans, which like were their gods. And we kind of see them here in Guild Wars 2 again, which maybe this might play a part in like the Flame Legion storyline, where we can see like the Flame Legion and potentially like other Char Legions having a moment of crisis where they are seeing their gods again, and they're either like, oh, what do I do now? Or they're like, I'm gonna kill these people super quickly and just grab my spear and stab them, which might be a very interesting story beat to experience in this expansion. But we got the spear here again, where she's just holding it, and then we got Kaith, which is a very interesting character to have in this expansion, because we haven't really interacted with her a lot, and it kind of seemed in a way that her story was done with Ender Dragons in like some capacity, but it seems like they're bringing her back again to play another major like frontline part, instead of pushing her back to the side to have her just like deal with the Crystal Bloom like in the background. But we see she's here in this expansion, and she's kind of just watching us fight and not helping us here against these Titans, where there are a ton of Titans, and we can see some sort of like the Jade Crystal or whatever that we see with the Mersat, and she is talking.
Is this?
And she says, is this? And then I think she's about to say something again, but I just want to go over this really quickly because this is really cool.
Is this?
But then this is really cool, where we see a ranger. Let's go back just a little bit here. That's good enough. Where we can see we have like a Savari ranger with a Fernhound pet right here, and then this Savari is wielding a spear, and we can see that rangers are going to have a really massive animation with their spear attack, which this animation looks super cool, but it might be a little weird when you have like 20 rangers and like a meta just like using this against the enemy. Of course, we got some like that visual bloat going on, but that aside, this is a really cool animation where it seems like some sort of like leap where you leap forward and probably deal damage, and maybe you leap faster than like normal leaps. I'm not entirely sure. Although it looks like normal but kind of slowed down. But it's just a really cool like type of like fox like spirit thing going on right here. So maybe we'll see some like, I think this is like a fox, right? It looks like one. maybe some sort of cat, I'm not entirely sure, but we might see some of like the Spirits of the Wild storyline in this expansion kind of connected to this, and then also given the fact that we are interacting with the Norn a little bit and the Coden, we just might be interacting with the spirits in general, which is really, really cool. And then we see that she's just helping out this Guardian, which is something that Kaith can do. And then we have potentially a Revenant or a Warrior here. So another character just doing a close spear attack, maybe an elementalist. I think this is kind of like heavy armor, not entirely sure. But we also have what looks like maybe a warrior or a guardian or a revenant here, just with a mace and shield, just attacking this bloodstone elemental, which is super interesting. And in the background, we see some really cool like red trees, and then we see some of these white mantle or Mersat ruins again, which are really, really cool. But they have like these red crystal things going on, so we might be interacting with like a bloodstone in this expansion, which would be really cool because we have some of these bloodstone creatures here, and we have these like red vibes going on, where if we were to look at bloodstones in general, we have interacted with them in Guild Wars 2 and in Guild Wars 1 as well, where we know there is one like in the like Steam Spear Mountains kind of near Ore, which we go to in Guild Wars 1, and we can see the door to in Guild Wars 2, and with Soda we actually go to the door as a part of one of like the special quests. And then we have the Bloodstone and Bloodstone Fin, which we interacted with kind of a lot in Guild Wars 2. It was destroyed, but we interacted with like the Ribnits in Bloodstone Fin. And then there is one in the Ring of Fire that we interacted with in the original Guild Wars. And we know there are two more, but we don't know where they are in the world. And players, ever since the Bloodstones were introduced into the game, speculated that one would be in the Isles of Janthir, and it seems like that is what is going on here, where we are going to be interacting with one of the Bloodstones in this expansion. And maybe if you just go back to the concept of Waiting Sorrow again, or whoever the villain of this expansion is going to be, that character might be tapping into the Bloodstone and trying to gain power in a similar way that Balthazar did in Living Road Season 3. And we're going to have to deal with that power and maybe some destabilization of magic in this area of the world. And we might have like a new plot point with the Wizard's Court, where maybe they know how to like handle Bloodstone magic very well, and they're like, why haven't you all been doing this since Guild Wars 1? And then we're like, well, we didn't know this, or whatever. But just really, really cool shots, and I think we're about to have a new voice line here.
Surely the strangers do not walk among all lands.
So something about surely the strangers do not walk amongst all lands, which is a very interesting piece of dialogue, and I'm not entirely sure what that would allude to.
Surely the strangers do not walk among all lands.
Which it might be something like the Coden in this area of the world are like very like isolated or whatever, and they are surprised by like the powers of like the Tyrians that are coming to the Isles of Janthir, and they're like, surely they haven't like gone across like all of Tyria and like colonized the entire world or something along those lines. But this could also be alluding to like some sort of like new faction coming into this like area of the world that we will be interacting with, maybe in like expansion number 6 or something, where it could be some faction of like enemies or allies from somewhere else in Tyria that have colonized a lot of Tyria except for like this central area and like Janthir or whatever, which I think that's a stretch, but it could be something we see. And this is probably ultimately going to be like a random piece of dialogue that we'll see in the story of just like two Coden talking to each other.
Surely
Some
the strangers do not walk
animations
among all
there,
lands.
like the fire, and then we have a basic strike animation. This is probably like a warrior just striking down a Titan.
A false
And then we
god.
see Malice again, where I'm pretty sure this is Malice. Let me double check. Yeah, this is 100% Malice. And she is saying the false gods,
God.
which, of course, that is a reference to the Titans, because the Titans are like the false gods of the Char, and she's kind of like in a moment of shock because of the Titans. And we have like this white mantle, like ruins in the background with these like cool trees and whatnot, which is going to be super, super interesting. And then we have this cool shot here where it's like a massive Titan in front of like these three characters right here, and the characters are like, oh, this is a big fight. And then we see like the massive Titan. This is kind of just like one of those generic like trailer beats where big enemy, we have to fight big enemy, save the world, etc., etc. And then that is the end of the main trailer here, which I will say, the logo animation here is phenomenal. I'll play it again and probably a couple more times here. It is just absolutely gorgeous. and I love it so much. And I think it really fits into like the vibes of what they're going for with this expansion. Let's go back right there, where I just love this animation. But if you are to look at the art here, we can see that we got like these mountains with like the rivers and this big lake here, and like all the trees and like the sky with like the birds and whatnot. And we have like the tiger strike or whatever through the Janthir wilds, and this is kind of just alluding to how this area of the world is kind of untamed and dangerous, which is really cool. And then I love like the arrowhead here, which other people see a different thing here, but this is an arrowhead. And we can kind of see that it's just all going back to this idea of kind of like a primal area of the world that's like untamed. And I think that it's just really cool because we can see a lot of vibes going on with this expansion, where we have like these untamed wilds, but then we also have kind of like a white mantle and like basalt structures, but then we got the wizard's court, and then we have like bloodstone stuff going on. And there's just a lot of very interesting story beats going on with this expansion. But of course, after this, we have a little bit more of the trailer, which is really, really cool, because this is revealing one of the biggest features of the expansion, and that is homesteading or player housing, whatever the technical word they use here, where we see a really, really cool area right here where we have this beautiful water wheel and this like cool tower and this like river, creek or whatever that goes out to potentially the ocean, or maybe that big lake that we saw on like the logo, which is probably not going to be an actual place in the expansion. But then we have this really, really cool house here. And if you're to continue forward, we have a Koden who is talking about how this is an area that is no longer a home to him, but it could be a home to S. And we can see the interior of this location that is pretty bare. And we have our player character right here. And then we can watch, we can decorate this area of the world, which this, basically from what we can see here, hi Logan, we have player housing where you can get like an area of the world, and there are probably going to be a lot of features related to this, but the big thing that they reveal here is how you can just decorate this home, which is really, really cool, because this is something we, like a system we can see with the guild halls in Guild Wars 2, where scribes can make guild decorations, which is basically like the same decorations that we can see here, where I recognize like all these things except for like, you know, the fireplace and stuff, which are from like the base model of this house. And I think this is like a new thing in the background right there. Oh no, that was there already. But we can see that we can just decorate this area and make it look however we want, which is like something that players have been wanting for a very, very, very long time, is player housing and an ability to customize your own like personal home. Because with the original Guild Wars 2, we saw the home instance, which is kind of like in a way player housing, but that's not player housing in any capacity similar to like WildStar or Paleo, or how any other MMO has ever done it. And we can see it here, which is very, very cool. And this is probably going to be a big gold sink and resource sink in this expansion, where they'll have players do a lot of grinding to get a lot of stuff, but then also add a variety of different ways to get some bonus decorations from like achievements and from something we're kind of seeing in just a moment, where you can like go around the world and probably get some like unique cool decorations to add to your house. And then we might see stuff like the integration of like the home instance stuff, where you could put your gathering nodes out here in the world, and then maybe like some other systems as well, which we'll have to wait and see. But ultimately, very, very cool, which I'll just like point out right here with like the whole, you know, buying things, only buy things if you want. But we have well, the Eldritch Gathering tools, which is really, really cool. So it looks like we'll be able to get gathering tools with the deluxe edition. But we have the Wayfinder's Versatile Table, which this is a really, really cool looking table, and you have to pay money to get this. So again, we have to pay money, but it has the name Wayfinders, which is you, of course. So they're kind of bringing Soto into this expansion in another way. And it is a really, really cool looking just table, and it looks like a strategy table or whatever. It looks like we kind of have like Samurag or like a demon right here on the table, which is really cool. But it is a home decoration item that you can put into your home, which is super, super cool. But now let's go through the expansion website, Expansion 5, Janthir Wilds, and let's go ahead and just read everything and look at everything here, which is super, super cool. And I'll just link this down in the description. But explore new lands, wield a spear in combat, and test yourself in challenging encounters in Guild Wars 2, Janthir Wilds. The newest adventure in the world of Tyria will play out over the course of 4 quarterly releases, a year of content, feature updates, and more. pre-purchase before the game launches on August 20th, 2024 to receive the Homesteader title, the Whispering Serpent's Pattern skin, and a box with your choice of one Serpent's Wrath weapon skin. So something we've seen with the expansions, and we can see kind of that promo art here. But going over to the next one, we can see one of those code in here, and we can see that this is kind of just like a very humble picture where this is a Coden just hanging out in normal garb, and we can see this like clothesline right here with what looks like a bunch of like fabrics on it. I kind of see ties or whatever, but it's probably like just normal cloth. And this might be some sort of like, kind of gives me martial arts vibes in a way. From like this photo, which might be something that we see a little bit. And then the next photo, we have another photo of a player housing, and we can just decorate this homestead however we want. And this might be a big feature in Guild Wars 2 moving forward, where we have this homestead here, but this might be something we see with like each expansion here on after, which might be a selling point for each expansion, is how there's like a brand new home that you can unlock in the expansion and decorate. So that's probably just going to be something kind of like fishing that we've seen with Ender Dragons, where they've kind of just integrated fishing into Soto and whatnot. But next we have a couple of Titans right here, which are cool looking mobs, and we can see more of those like magical kind of like energy trees right there. So I think this is definitely going to be a little bit of something kind of like some environmental storytelling going on here, which will be fun to see. And then we have this photo, which is the photo that they used to tease this expansion. And I just want to say pretty much everyone thought this was going to be Ascalon, or not pretty much everyone, but like a good chunk of people thought this would be Ascalon, and some people thought this would be like a time travel Fractals of the Mist to like old Ascalon, which is like a very interesting idea. But I saw this and I instantly thought Woodland Cascades, which I was wrong, but I'm not completely wrong, because the Isles of Janthir is pretty close to the Woodland Cascades, and we got some of those vibes going on right here, which is really cool. But down here we have some more photos, and I'll read the text in a moment. I'll just go through these. This is an absolutely gorgeous shot with some White Mantle ruins in the background, and some beautiful trees and mountains and a river, and like all of this foliage here, which is beautiful. And then we have another shot of like some sort of Coden village here with some waterfalls. And I'm just going to say this for like the 20th time. I am so excited to explore like the environment of this world, because this is just absolutely gorgeous. And we have another shot here of some like creature that died, maybe it kind of looks like a wyvern maybe, or a dragon that died a very long time ago, and we just have the bones and a cool shot there. But then we have Into the Wilds, head north to the wilderness of Janthir in the latest Guild Wars 2 expansion. Recent momentous events have left the denizens of Tyria determined to recover and build a new future together, knowing that cooperation with neighbors will be crucial to their long-term success. Your allies dispatched you to befriend the lowland Coden of Janthir. So there, I guess we have the confirmation that they are indeed Coden, but like a different variety of Coden. A dangerous land that was once home to the strange Mersat and their White Mantle sycophants in the time of the original Guild Wars 2. The story you uncover on the Isles of Janthir will play out across 4 major releases, starting with the initial launch of Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds on August 20th, 2024, and continuing to introduce content and quarterly releases through the first half of 2025. Each quarter of content also includes feature updates, new challenging group content, combat system updates, and more. So this kind of seems to allude that we won't be interacting with the White Mantle directly in this expansion, but we will be interacting with like their ruins and like potentially like jade constructs and whatnot throughout this expansion. So that might be an interesting story beat. Here are some more photos where we have this cool shot of a Coden home with a very cool mountain in the background that's like very white, and this very cool like tree or like stump of a tree right here. And we can see that there seems to be like a garden plot right here, which might be very interesting, where we have this greenhouse as well. And I don't think this is player housing. I think this is just like someone's home, but it's really cool with like the greenhouse and like the garden plot and maybe like a barn or a shed in the background there. And then in this photo, we have the interior of maybe this place, where it looks like this person's got some woodworking going on and maybe like brewing some alcohol or something in the background there, and just a bunch of different supplies, which I absolutely love interiors in video games. And I wish Guild Wars 2 did more interiors, and it looks like we got a really cool interior going on right here. And you can see out a little bit, so this is really cool. And then we got this photo, which actually kind of looks like player housing, where we can see we got a bed here with a Quaggan plush on it, and this really cool chest, and this like vanity desk with the mirror, and this painting, and just very, very cool. But we have Home Sweet Homestead. Your journeys will lead you to your own homestead, an account-wide personal housing instance for you to develop as you complete its associated mastery. Homesteads present you with an area of land and a permanent structure to cultivate, decorate, and share with your friends. You can also access nodes and unlocks you've acquired for your personal story home instance in your homestead. Before we launch on August 20th, we'll be back to share loads more information and a look at homesteads decorating, which this will be very exciting to see. And I guess it is now confirmed that you will get your nodes from your home instance, and they have this word here, cultivate, which is kind of interesting. So it seems like, well, if you are to look at that word directly, we could do maybe some gardening on our homestead, but it probably means you can like upgrade your homestead as you progress through the game and like unlock the mastery and maybe some other things as well. Then we got some more photos here of like these two Coden with the rainbow we saw, and then this cool action shot with the spear, and then this other cool action shot with the spear, where yes, it's confirmed spears, new weapon for all professions. Learn the secrets of the spear from the lowland Coden. Spears, which were previously only used in underwater combat, will now have all new skills for each profession on land. Some professions wield spears as formidable melee weapons, while others hurl them at range with devastating accuracy. Spears can be used interchangeably in the aquatic and terrestrial weapon slots, which is very interesting, but you will need to equip multiple spears. Oh, that's really interesting. But you will need to equip multiple spears to use them in both locations. One of the post-launch releases will also introduce a new legendary spear to acquire. Any unlocked spear skins in your wardrobe will work for spears equipped on the land. And we have this other cool shot with like the wolves, and then a titan here, and that's it. And then probably one of the biggest things, raids and encounters. Additional challenging encounters will become available alongside new story chapters in the 3 major releases that follow Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds. In the first of these releases around November 2024, you'll get to challenge a new raid comprising 3 encounters. The story of these encounters will be accessible in 2 ways, through a classic 10-player raid instance, or 8th raid, or with large groups and open world events. The convergence system will also be extended to the region of Janthir, including Janthir-specific enemies. The following major release, coming in the first quarter of 2025, will introduce a new challenge mode and legendary challenge mode for the raid, and in our final major release of Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds, we'll add a new fractal and its accompanying challenge mode, which it seems like they're just hitting it out of the ballpark here, which if you were to look at this, they're finally adding a new raid, which is something that I wanted a long time, but on top of a new raid, they are making it so you're like player who doesn't want to do raids can still experience the story in some capacity in the open world where you can fight these bosses. But then they are adding this new challenge mode and the legendary challenge mode, which seems to be like a new system that they have kind of put into the game, given like feedback and also like some balancing and stuff that has happened with like Soto stuff, which is kind of a story to get into. But we can see that there are basically like 4 different versions of like each of these bosses that you can fight, like an easy mode, a normal mode, a hard mode, and like an extreme mode, which is super, super exciting. And they're also continuing with the convergences system, which is really cool to see that they're not just dropping this after Soto, and it's like a pretty fun like big piece of content. And they are also adding a new fractal with a challenge mode, which it's really, really cool to see that they are still adding more to that. So largely, this seems like a pretty good expansion on paper for instance content in Guild Wars 2, and we'll just have to wait and see if the instance content is actually good and enjoyable as we experience it. But a very interesting thing here, which wasn't really alluded to in the trailer, I think, but we have Wild Warclaws. Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds features the Warclaw mount, which this actually looks like a ranger animal that we saw. But Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds features the Warclaw mount with new mechanics. Previously only available through World vs. World, the Warclaw will be introduced to players in the story of Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds, including new skills for PvE play. At the same time, we'll be revisiting the Warclaw's WVW skills to provide a refreshed experience that builds on what we've learned about mounts since first implementing the Warclaw, which this is really, really cool. So we kind of see with like Soto, they took the sky scale mount and really expanded on it in Soto, and now with this expansion we are seeing the Warclaw, which this is kind of something that I predicted and expected with future expansions, that like each expansion here on out will take like one of the mount and really expand on the idea of that mount, and we are seeing that here with the Warclaws, and we're going to have a lot of like Warclaw based stuff. Maybe we'll have to like siege a stronghold or something in Janthir, and we'll just be interacting with them, which is really, really cool. But then we can see the Wizard's Court here, where this is a really interesting screenshot actually, which is telling a lot of stuff now that I look at it, because we have Iskarin here, which is really, really cool. But in the background, it looks like we have our player character here, and then we have Frode, and then we have Anise, and this looks like Jenna, and then we have a Tengu, and is this Zoja? I can't really tell. Maybe if I just like do this, if we go like super far in here, it doesn't look like Zoja. But then we have Bram here, and then this is like Scotty, I think, or the other one of Newt Whitebear's sons. I think that's who that is. So it seems like they are really focusing on this idea of like a united Tyria, which might be something that we see a lot in this expansion and going forward in future expansions, which is a very interesting thing to like think and talk about how like all these different factions are kind of coming together and allying. And this seems to be some sort of peace summit where Iskarin, the representative and leader of the Wizard's Court, is kind of like talking to all the different leaders of the world, where we can see the leaders of the Norn, and then this is probably just one of the counselors, and then we have like the humans, and if we continue around the room, we'll see leaders all around this area surrounding Iskarin. So this should be really, really cool to see, and I'm kind of excited to see how the story progresses in the future. But it's also a little bit interesting to think about, because maybe it's taking away some of the intrigue of like faction warfare in Guild Wars 2. Like, for example, if we are to look at like the Char versus humans, which was a big thing in Guild Wars 1, it seems to be that they're like really kind of like pushing away from like that idea of a story, and like any conflicts in Tyria is kind of like a united Tyria versus like an evil faction, and not so much like political like intrigue within like the individual factions as a whole. But that'll just be something that we see play out in the future. But rewards: the launch of Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds, and each of its major releases will include a Wizard's Vault seasonal refresh that introduces new objectives and rewards. At launch, players will be able to work towards 2 new armor and weapon sets, as well as several other cosmetic rewards. More cosmetics will be available in the following major releases, including a legendary spear and legendary backpack. So there we go. Confirmed legendary spear and a brand new backpack, which this is kind of an interesting idea, because we already have a bunch of legendary backpacks in the game, but this might be like an open world avenue to get to the backpack, because you have the fractal backpack, which is like instance content, and then you have the PvP and the world versus world one, and I think those are the only 3 in the game, right? So we see a 4th one that will most likely allow people to get it through open world content. It's either that or through the raid, which might be interesting. But that is everything with the trailer and the release page, and that is basically kind of like all the story discussion and speculation that I really wanted to go over. But if you were to take a moment, and we can see the Bastion, the Penitent here, and if you were to zoom out a little bit, we can see Drizzlewood Coast that is going into the Woodland Cascades, but we have the Isle of Janthir up here, which seems to be the main focus for this expansion, given the fact that it is the Janthir Wilds. So if I were to just take a moment and to maybe guess what we got going on here, I have a feeling we'll probably have like a map that's right here, which is kind of like Woodlands, Cascadey, and kind of like mountainous, Shiver Peaks, whatever. And then we'll have a map here that is really like Janthiri, and they may change the art of Janthir or something. And then we'll have like a big one here that's like the 3rd release that like really dives deep into like the story and like maybe some sort of stronghold on like the main villain of this expansion, which is going to be interesting. But that is everything that I wanted to talk about in this video, which is a lot of information, and I'm going to go ahead and throw some of the links down in the description, and I'll also have some videos in the description that I talked about, as well as on the screen right here, if you want to go ahead and watch those as well. Where if you have any ideas about this expansion, any discussions or speculations, I probably only talked about the fraction of the potential speculation that people are talking about in the Guild Wars 2 community, go ahead and leave that down in the description, and I would love to read through them. But I hope you all are taking good care of yourselves, and remember, as always, to drink some water, check your posture, and subscribe. And I'm excited to see all of you in Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds. Have a good one, everyone.